Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Falcoholic Live, episode 320. I'm your host, Kevin Knight. I'm Falcoholic Kevin, joined by my co-host from Tuesday Takes, but, some technical difficulties on my part, plus just, a busy schedule. We've moved Tuesday Takes to Wednesday Takes this week. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue, so we're probably going to stick with the Tuesday Takes name. But we do have a great live episode for you guys here with Tre'Shon, because even though you might not know it if you're a Falcons fan, the first week of free agency did happen and big moves were made. Not necessarily by Atlanta, but the Falcons did actually make a number of, I would say, mid-level to small moves, and we're going to talk about all those. Of course, the biggest move of all came in today, and no, it's not Jordan Fuller. It's the GOAT himself, Felipe Franks. I thought the Felipe Franks era was behind us, Tre'Shon. It is not. It is back in full force, so I couldn't be happier about that. But before we dive into that craziness, Tre'Shon, how are you doing?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I guess you could say it's been a special teamer's paradise so far. I'm trying to enjoy all of that.
Yeah, yeah, it really has. I mean, I would say that the if only the rest of the roster was. I mean, it seems like they're like, Marquise, you just tell us who you want, buddy, and we're gonna go get those guys. Special teams is we're gonna build our entire free agency around special teams, because at the very least they will have no excuses about the performance of the special teams coverage units when things kick off this year. The rest of the roster, maybe not so much. We're gonna dive into that. And the question on everyone's minds, it's been asked a bunch. We're going to, give our take on it after the first week of free agency. Have the Falcons actually improved? And obviously we'll talk about the signings and, we'll talk a little bit about Kirk Cousins because that is the storyline that will never go away. It's evergreen, ladies and gentlemen. But we'll get into that stuff and we will get into a lot of free agency talk and, of course, your questions as well on tonight's live. Before we dive in, I want to bring you guys a real quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline. Folks, it's March Madness, and BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting, no matter what it is, of course, including the madness itself, whether you're a seasoned fan or first-time bettor. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from, obviously, college basketball, men and women, to a $200,000 bracket contest going on right now, so make sure to sign up for that. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source, from every Cinderella story to every hat trick. BetOnline's got you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Make sure when you sign up to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, Tre'Shon, well, I feel like we should open with the most important topic, which is that the GOAT, Felipe Franks, is back. Arthur Smith must be furious right now. Felipe Franks finally hits free agency, and the Steelers are too busy trying to convince Aaron Rodgers to leave his darkness retreat and show up in Pittsburgh to sign the paper that they miss out on the steal of the century, Felipe Franks, back in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's a good thing we pushed this show to Wednesday.
Yeah, we would have missed it.
Yeah, boy, I would have been really disappointed to have missed this one. Kind of like I said, from a special team standpoint, it's like, okay, great. In terms of tight end 3, it's a little concerning. And man, I was probably one of Ross Dwelly's biggest critics last year, and I really feel like I'm being punished right now because I'm winning on the special teams angle of this move. But yeah, we the tight end position is still really interesting. The approach the team's taken in the first 2 years with Zach.
Yeah, I believe the only other tight end on the roster is Nikola Kalinic, who sounds really cool. I mean, the name instills fear of like a Frankenstein-esque monster scientist guy. So I mean, maybe we got something there. I mean, the name grade, yeah, the name grade is very high. But they obviously haven't really done much at tight end. Pitts and Werner are almost certainly playing almost every snap if they're healthy, right? I mean, Ross Dwelly barely played even when they wanted to play him, and then they quickly decided that they did not want to play him. So, we will see We will see what they do at tight end. I don't think they're done there.
Boy, I hope not.
I hope not. But there's a lot of tight ends still on the market. As you guys can see, they're still adding players. Like, this conversation right now is about, did the Falcons improve in free agency in the first week? We can't make that the headline of the show because that's too boring, right? It has to be, did they improve? Because this is the defining. After 1 week of free agency, it's over. There's no more. You can't. The ballots are in. We're done. But it's it's early. And it's clearly not a high priority to them. And I guess it makes sense that it's not because, their top two guys that are going to play almost every snap are already under contract. So maybe they're just going to take a wait and see approach, and maybe a draft pick if they end up getting some extra picks, or maybe one of those sevenths goes to like a blocking tight end or something. Yeah. But, at this point, it doesn't seem like they're in much of a hurry to address tight end. So.
Yeah, no, they don't. It doesn't seem like they're really in a hurry to address a lot of areas.
No, and then we're gonna get to that. Before we dive into all of the other signings, we should probably touch on the most heated debate on the Falcons podcast sort of sphere, which is, did the Falcons do the right thing by holding on to Kirk Cousins? And you guys know I love Aaron, so this is meant, in a loving way. But I will accept the mantle, Aaron, of the new prophet. So thank you for bestowing that upon me. I accept it with grace. And Aaron's down bad right now. I get that, and I don't think he should be. I don't think Aaron should be, because I don't think he was saying anything that was that outlandish to begin with. I think it was very reasonable to think the Falcons were going to cut Kirk Cousins. That's not a crazy claim. So if you guys are like, "Oh, you were dumb, Aaron, for thinking they were going to cut," that's not true. I think I think it was much bolder to take my stance of they won't cut him for all these reasons. That is probably the crazier stance. So to couch it with that, but Aaron did miss something that I wanted to make sure to reinforce, which is the offset language in the contract. I know Aaron was very upset about the Falcons guaranteeing another $10 million to Kirk Cousins. I'm not sure if Aaron was aware at the time he recorded about this offset language. We only really heard about it for sure over the weekend. And I don't know if this is something that is in all roster bonuses or just this particular one. So, I mean, my contract knowledge is pretty deep, but that kind of minutia, that's something for the true people that actually read these. They don't give me the contract, guys. I can't actually read it. That would be helpful if the Falcons want to send me some contracts. But whoever signs the Falcons next, or whoever signs Kirk Cousins next year after he's cut, presumably by either the Falcons or somebody else, any amount that they pay Kirk Cousins subtracts from the amount the Falcons owe for that roster bonus. It's offset. And Kirk Cousins isn't going to be under any inclination to take the veteran minimum next year, because he no longer is getting $27.5 million base salary guaranteed, and all of his Falcons money will have been paid out, essentially at that point. So he'll be looking for a new deal. Now, I don't think he's going to be asking for $30 million. He's probably going to be asking for, if things go well, maybe a starting caliber contract. But I don't think it's out of the realm of the reasonable that he is asking for 10 or more. I mean, I don't think he's going to get that necessarily, but he could ask for and any amount that he gets would offset anything. So the Falcons are probably not going to be stuck with much of that bill, if any. And it also applies to a team that trades for him. So if another team trades for him, they also benefit from the offset language. So again, they're probably not all that concerned about that money either, because all or part of it's probably going to be paid by his next team. Or if they re-sign him, obviously they just fold that into his next contract or whatever they want to do. So I think the money angle is nowhere near as important as I think we initially thought, because that was the reason to cut him, basically, was if you want to make sure you're not on the hook for this extra $10 million, that would be the reason to cut him. Even though you don't save any money, you're making sure you don't owe any additional money next year. So that was something that Aaron never mentioned in his show. I'm guessing he just forgot or just wasn't aware of it at the time. Aaron's a good guy. I don't think he's intentionally misleading you guys, to be clear. I think he just maybe missed that detail. I think it's an important detail for why this is a good signing. I hope that Aaron and I will be able to get on a show and hash this out. I think it would be a fun show. Because whenever we get on, we obviously go at each other's throats. No, we're very respectful, actually. But that is an important detail, I think, that maybe was missed in that analysis.
Yeah, so I knew about the trade situation because it was a guarantee for 2026. So I knew in the situation of the trade, but the offsetting language for the cut, I've known that's existed, but I did not realize, kind of like how you said at the beginning, I don't know if that's in everybody's contract now or if that's, something that's worked out differently. But yeah, that's a very important detail. That I think, the only other fun detail I knew about Kirk's contract was that they did take an insurance policy out on him in case there was some kind of injury. So if you were somebody that was also worried about the money from that standpoint, if they signed him and he got hurt, they did have a backup plan for that. So Fontenot put a little bit of, language in this to kind of help the team out as well. So my hat's off to you, Kevin. You were on that from the beginning, saying that you thought that was how they were going to move. I kind of went back and forth. I wasn't really sure. I thought, well, maybe they're worried that a team won't want to trade for that extra bonus. And they don't seem to be too worried about it at this point. I think that, they're going to take calls, they're going to make calls, and this might end up with Kirk riding into, the season as QB2, whatever. I feel like he's probably going to play in the preseason this time around if he is with the Falcons. So he won't be upset because that's what he wanted last year. And they'll dangle him out there and see what happens.
Yeah. I think, we'll see what happens with it. I seriously doubt he's on the roster week 1. Every single preseason, training camp, whatever, there's a quarterback injury. It sucks. It's terrible. And I think part of, I think Aaron raised a lot of good points about well, why would anybody be trading for Kirk Cousins thinking he's going to lead them to the playoffs? The answer is they won't. That's not why someone's trading for Kirk Cousins. They're trading for Kirk Cousins because they need someone they can at least sell the fan base on, or someone that if their quarterback's going to miss 8 games or 10 games or whatever, they can think that Kirk Cousins might be able to keep them afloat for that long until the quarterback gets back, or they can at least go into the season with not Gardner Minshew or something like that as their starter, where you can't sell anyone on Gardner Minshew. You can't, you're not selling anyone on Jameis Winston at this point. You're not those aren't serious propositions. Those aren't, you're not, your fans are, especially if you're a team that loses a starting quarterback to an injury, you can't just phone it in. Fans won't tolerate that. Kirk at that point will be interesting to teams. And after June 1st also, I don't think this is ideal for the Falcons. I'm sure they would love to get this done before June 1st. But after June 1st, the Falcons can take on more of the contract and make it easier for a team to trade for him, probably in exchange for more draft compensation. Because at the time, at this point, I still think we're talking about a late round pick swap for Cousins. I still don't think this rumor of a third is ridiculous. No one's sending a third round pick for Kirk Cousins. It's not going to happen. Now, if the Falcons ate the entire contract or something, then maybe you could get into that. If the Falcons are eating, $27.5 million of this contract or something, or $25 million or whatever it is to get his cap hit minimum for somebody, then we could talk about okay, well, now you're buying a pick. You're not really trading a third for Cousins. You're trading a third for Cousins and $25 million in cap space, so that's the only scenario where you're getting anything above, I would say, a fifth for Cousins. But, no one's trading for him to be their playoff savior. You're going to sell your fans on, he's taking us to the playoffs. We're winning a Super Bowl with Kirk. Those days are gone. This was the last chance for that, for Kirk. No one's doing that again. Someone will trade for him because they need a quarterback.
Yeah.
And, that's why someone's going to trade for him. Not because they think he's this legitimate high-end starter, but because he is a quarterback with a proven track record who, for most of last season looked serviceable, looked good even until he got hurt, whatever that means, whatever that really means, who knows.
Yeah. I will say though, based on the team's moves that we'll get into, the way this team has spent money, I would not put it past them to once again go as far against the grain as possible with the quarterback position and keep Kirk in this likely scenario that they are that team that unfortunately takes an injury or something like that happens. They lose a guy for a longer amount of time they want to. If Atlanta was somehow able to fall into that situation, which we do not want to see, but they had Kirk here and they were able to get that string of games out of him, you could see them saying hey, it was all worth the cost at the end. Like we had said, we were prepared to pay this money. I think that there's a real chance that they would feel comfortable waiting for a team that might not get that injury until week 3, week 4 of the regular season. And they just kind of, eat a little bit of money, with those roster bonuses as the years start to go on, or as the
Yeah.
games start to go on.
Right, exactly. And that's always an option. Like they're committed at this point. Like there's no point in cutting him now. Like
Yeah,
that. So
no.
so they're committed to keeping him until a trade materializes. And I agree with you. I don't think they care that much about him being the backup. I think Kirk cares.
Yeah.
And like again, people are like, oh, he's gonna cause so much drama. Like, no, he's not.
He's done
Kirk
the
Cousins.
worst he could do already,
Yeah.
and they stood firm on
Yeah.
that ground. He did the
Yeah.
worst he could do. He tried to throw them under the bus during Super Bowl
Yep.
media week. He's like already come out and backtracked on injury stories. There's nothing else he can do at this point that would make things worse.
Yeah. They're like, oh, he won't show up for spring workouts. Who cares?
But we
He doesn't
get
need to
money
work
back.
out. He doesn't. Yeah, I mean, I don't care if he shows up for
Yeah,
OTAs. I don't give a shit. Yeah. Like, I mean, Penix is the one that needs to show up for OTAs, not Kirk. Kirk's not the starter anymore. I don't really care if Kirk shows up for OTAs. Like, and if he holds out, he's gonna start paying the Falcons back everything he doesn't do. So, it's not really. There's not really any point. Like, he's not playing. So, like, if he's holding out because he's the backup, it's not really hurting the Falcons in any material way. Like, I mean, I guess it's a PR shitstorm, but it's more like a PR shitstorm for him. Like, so I mean, yeah, it's not ideal, but like, it is what it is.
Being a pro when it's time to be a pro, and I like as much as a stink as he's made during the offseason, when it is football season, when it is time to go out there, he's going to hold the clipboard because that's what he did when he was here. He was quiet all the way through the end. We didn't hear any noise until the season ended. And if he's here, he's going to do and be the company man that he's always been. He might not be happy, but at that point, he knows there's nothing he can do.
Yeah, he needs to convince a team that he's a starter. That's what he has to do. And him pouting and holding out isn't going to convince anyone of anything. Like, if anything, he needs to show up and show that he's healthy. If he could go blow some preseason team into oblivion, maybe that probably would be the best thing he could do at this point. Go out there, look healthy, blast some poor second string unit into the depths of hell, and prove that he's starting caliber quarterback still. That's probably the best thing for him at this point. So it's gonna be fine, guys. Kirk is not going to cause that much trouble. I honestly don't think he's capable of it. Like, I think his agent is like doing the best he can. Kirk, you got to be an asshole. You got to be more of an asshole. And he's just like, you meanies, why are you doing this? Like, that's just not who he is. He's a professional. These are all professionals. He's a grown ass man. He's making $40 million. Like, how goddamn upset can you be? Like, let's be honest. Like, what is it? He's gonna be like Chappelle, crying into his stack of cash. Oh no, like, I'm so, like, it just. I don't buy it, right? I mean, I just don't buy that angle. And also, this is a little more pointed, Aaron. I love you. We can't just throw our hands up and say draft picks don't matter because Fontenot can't draft. Like, maybe you're right. I mean, maybe you're right about that. But like, are we really saying like just screw all the draft picks and don't even try to get them because Fontenot has had a sketchy track record as a drafter? Like, we can't just give up. Right, that's not a real strategy. No one's gonna do that. I don't really get bringing that up as an option because, like, you're like, oh well, it doesn't matter if they get a pick because Fontenot's gonna blow it. Okay, so it doesn't matter if they play the season because they're just gonna blow it, right? Like, I mean, where does that get us? It doesn't get us anywhere. It's defeatist and it's pointless. So I mean, just that'll be a little more pointed about that, right? Like that. There's no point to that conversation. Of course, they're going to try to get as many picks as they can. Of course, Fontenot is going to try his best to draft well, and maybe he'll still screw it up. But God damn it, you're definitely going to screw up a 6th-round pick you don't even have because you're going to get nothing out of it. So I mean, it's just you can't operate like that. Like, maybe they'll screw up and maybe they'll get fired or whatever it is, but they need to at least have a chance to draft. Like, we're not going to say, well, they should just trade all their picks and phone it in because they're just so terrible. Like, we can't trust them to do anything. Maybe they'll screw it up. Maybe they won't. I don't know, but they need to at least try. I mean, we're here to try, right? Like, I mean, we can't, what kind, I mean, is anyone going to sit here and watch this show if we just say, well, the Falcons are winning 2 games next year. I guess we can just phone it in. We'll see you guys next offseason. Bye. Like, we're not getting anywhere with that, right? And it's not like we're blowing smoke up you guys' asses or anything like that. I mean, we're trying to be as, we're going to talk about free agency here in a minute, and it's not going to be, spoiler alert, it's not going to be overly positive, I think. Don't want to speak for Tre'Shon on that, but it's, it is what it is. Like, this team is in a tough spot. They haven't exactly done anything to other than maybe drafting Michael Penix. It's like the one stroke of genius, and it was the most controversial thing they did too, which is hilarious. But there's bad vibes around the team. They haven't exactly knocked it out of the park, but they're going to keep trying, and we should keep arguing for them to make the right business decisions to put them in position to have success. Whether that means whether they actually do the thing is completely out of our hands, but we can at least advocate for them to do the right thing. And the right thing is to get picks, to try to get plus value in transactions, to try to move Kirk Cousins, get your money back, get assets, whatever you can. And if they screw it up, well, that's too damn bad. But like, at least they tried, right? I would rather they go out swinging than just phone it in completely. So, and I feel like cutting him would have been phoning it in completely. So,
yeah, without the pre-June 1st designation, like it really didn't make any sense to kind of do the early cut. So I am at this point just kind of like, they're definitely like, there's not the early designation is just not going to even be an option for them anymore, because they've already taken the 10 million bonus. Like they've already accepted that as a part of his 2026 future. So, it just doesn't really make sense at this point to do anything but wait it out, take calls, and, see if they can get something. I think that, the difference in terms of money savings, I kind of understand just kind of going this route and just kind of waiting to see if you can get the pick, kind of like you said, not just kind of just saying screw it. I understand the logic behind, like, Fontenot's draft history and everything, and that's kind of why I was like a supporter of the Judon move last year, because I was like, yeah, what, I still don't think Terry drafts somebody in the third round that gets 5.5 sacks or whatever it was that Judon got last year, like regardless of how the overall play was. But like you said, you got to get the pick first before you can mess it up. So
yeah,
I think that if they were to get a 6th, maybe they do a silly little trade up on day 3, maybe whatever they can do with it. But in this draft class, when they do need some of these positions that are on the lower end in terms of positional value that you can find on day 3, like a safety where they found Helms in round 7, or centers where you can find centers in round 5 and 6, like trying to get that day 3 pick makes sense now. Or if you try to get a future one to maybe use for a trade deadline move. We talked about this when the trade deadline happened last year, but the most moved and traded picks at the trade deadline are day 3 picks. It's 4, 5s, 5s, 6s, and 7s were the highest moved picks. So you try to get one for those scenarios, trying to always think long term if you can.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I think that's all we'll say for now on Kirk Cousins, because we're gonna have plenty more time to talk about Kirk Cousins, I'm sure. But yeah, we'll move on from that. But I agree with you there. What's up, Damsky? Welcome in. Good to see you, man. We got a couple questions real quick I wanted to get to. We got Furball with the $2. Thanks, Furball. Appreciate you. Is there a chance we get good pass rush in the draft or free agency? I mean, obviously there's a chance. They're definitely going to draft an edge rusher. I can't guarantee you that it'll be the first pick. They're going to draft one. They're going to draft probably an interior guy too. And I don't think they're done in free agency. As much as, we're going to talk about what they've done so far, I don't think they're done in free agency. So yes, I mean, I can't say that it'll be good, but they're going to address the pass rush more than they have already. They're not done, like not even close, I don't think. Like we're probably going to see 1 to 2 picks, probably another signing, maybe some late movement. That last year they did those 2 moves like right before the season. So, I mean, I wouldn't rule out anything even after the draft or after final cuts or anything like that too. Like they're just going to and this is what I tried to warn people about, like a week or 2 ago, which is like they could start this free agency pretty slowly because again, they don't have a lot of cap space. They are kind of working under some constraints at this moment. So, we'll see how they do it. But I do think I think they're going to add more without a doubt. I don't think they're done.
Yeah, they still have levers to pull that they haven't pulled. It's been interesting to see how they've gone about it. I thought they would be a little more aggressive. Like I knew they'd be hamstrung, just kind of with the cap space that they're operating with, and that you don't want to overextend yourself with some of those restructures. But there's just been some good deals out there that I'm surprised that they haven't kind of gotten in on. So maybe that means they're still trying to get in play for the Hendrickson sweepstakes. It sounds like the Bengals price tag talks of it, them wanting a first, probably legit. And, I think that it makes sense for you to hold on to your first. I would totally be cool with trading a second or anything like that, but it just kind of feels like that's probably where I do start to weigh the risk of him being 30. I probably expect him to fall off in the third year, but it could happen in the second year if he were traded here and you're paying him a lot of money. So, it's tough, but they definitely can still make some moves. And I'm with you. I don't think that they're going to stop making signings. They're definitely not going to stop making signings.
No.
They're going to keep adding more special teams players and blue
yes.
at this point.
We're going to have a full roster of special teams players. It's going to be like 22 special team starters out there. No, but yeah, it's, it is what it is. It's been a slow start. And we'll go from there. We'll see what they end up doing. But we got Alex Foster with the $5. Alex, thank you so much. He says, you guys and Adnan are my favorite people to listen to talk about the Falcons. Keep up the great work. Much love. Thank you, Alex. Really appreciate you. Love the love. Guys, appreciate everybody else for hanging out too. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't done that already. Good opportunity to get that plug in. But subscribing helps us out a lot. So if you haven't done that yet, it could be a big help. But yeah, let's dive in to these free agent additions. We already covered the biggest one in Felipe Franks, but we can start with today's other move, which is, nowhere near as impactful as Felipe Franks, clearly. But Jordan Fuller, interesting, a guy that was very linked to the Falcons last offseason as someone, coming over from Los Angeles potentially, went to the Panthers, did not have a good year. Did not have a good year. And again, I'm not too sure how much, defensive players, I think, are more prone to their surroundings impacting them, good and bad, right? Like, I would think, the best we saw from Fuller in Los Angeles when he was playing on a really good defense, probably, made him look a little better. And playing on the garbage fire that was the Panthers defense last year probably made him look worse. I think Jordan Fuller's kind of an average safety, which is fine. He's basically replacing Justin Simmons. We haven't seen the contract details. My guess is he's here for significantly less than what Justin Simmons was last year. Simmons was making $8 million roughly, I think. So I'm guessing Fuller's here around 3 to 4, so about half. And I'm guessing the play will be pretty similar, in terms of quality. I think he'll be an average safety. Not as much of a ball hawk necessarily, but he's a better run defender. I think the one thing you can depend on Fuller for is he's been a good run defender pretty much everywhere in his career. So I like it. They needed another, at least, passable starting safety in this depth chart. I mean, it was dire. It was well, I hope Helms is ready to start, because otherwise Benny Sapp III better strap him up. Better strap him on, because...
it's funny you say that about Helms.
Yeah. So, I like Helms, but that would be a little aggressive.
I think they like Helms.
I think so too. I think this is actually a sign that they do. But yeah. What do you think about the Fuller edition?
Yeah. I ran through Fuller's tape today, and so he was banged up this year in a hamstring thing. When I watched him in the Saints game, it looked like he messed up his arm or shoulder or something too, and I could tell it was messing with him. So I know he played banged up this year. That's what some of the Panthers guys have been saying. The run fit ability is still there. He's I agree with you that I think overall the safety play is going to be average, like it was with Simmons, but it's definitely going to be in reverse. Fuller can do all the run fits and everything that the defense needs. He's great coming down from the third level. He played a lot more in the box this year at Carolina. He's kind of always been a deep third safety, but they definitely used him closer to the line. And I think that was kind of one of the things that messed with him and why he got a little bit more banged up this year, because while he is a really good run defender, he's not the biggest guy. He's just tenacious and just understands angles and is really good at fits. So he's always been able to kind of just get a paycheck in this league because of that ability alone. And so I do think that he is a solid addition. The coverage work is rough. It was rough this last year. When I watch him, it was kind of this feels like what 23 Helms was doing. And so I'm kind of like, they talk about how much they like Helms, and like I know that there's been a lot of talk with Starks and stuff and some of these safety prospects, but like I really got the feeling today that I'm like, what if they like really, really like Helms and they think he's like the guy and they're gonna put him in the starting role. Fuller's your third safety. And then they maybe draft a guy later and or attack the position with another like low budget safety signing. It definitely kind of changed my perspective on how they view the room, because the way he and Helms overlap so much, it really made me feel like that he's here to kind of be like his backup guy. But they still don't necessarily have somebody like Micah Abernathy. I don't think he's been re-signed or anything like that.
Right.
So they still don't have that fourth safety. They still don't have another safety to kind of fill in behind Bates. I think Fuller could do a little bit of that, but like not like, for the run game, sure, but not like as a coverage player. So I'm really fascinated with like what they're doing at the safety room. Fuller is a classic addition for us. He's a veteran. He's familiar with the scheme. Like Gray loves veteran players. He loves these older guys that you understand their floor, and their ceiling already, so you don't know how. So you don't need to overextend them or where to not overextend them. And this is a signing that just kind of, I think, points to the direction that they really like Helms, and that maybe the safety talk has kind of been a bunch of smoke, or maybe it's not necessarily smoke, just that this opportunity presented itself and they wanted to go that route instead.
Yeah, that's my thought. I think they love Malachi Starks, but I also think probably half the teams in the NFL love Malachi Starks. It seems like he was like I think he was like a prospect fatigue kind of guy, where everyone's like got bored of seeing him as like a top 10, top 15 pick, and like so his stock just kind of fell for no reason. Yeah. I mean, he didn't have the crazy year he had the year before at Georgia, but I think people saw him work out and just like how fluid he is, and they're like, oh wait, this is a top 15 guy. Yeah, it's like, oh wait, this is a top 15 guy. Never mind. And so now I think there's a good chance he's gone before 15. And I think the other side of the coin is Falcons are gonna be working the phones to get out of 15. Like I think that's obvious. I think everyone in the NFL knows it. Now, whether they do it or not, if they can pull it off, that's an open question. Spoiler alert, I'm going to do a trade on my next mock. It's coming out Friday. We're going to do a trade down. And like, there's definitely, I think, teams that could be interested. It's kind of hard to predict because, again, it's like I have to simulate up to 15 and then from there simulate who's going to trade up. And, it's a lot of simulating going on. But there certainly are some teams that could be coming up for wide receiver, for tackle, tight end maybe if Warren goes super early. Like there's a lot of teams that like Loveland a lot. And I think the Falcons would be okay with taking slightly below market value for the trade down. Like I think they're looking for a day 2 pick, but they're okay with it being a third. And I think they just want a day 3 pick on top of that. And, if they're going down a couple spots, maybe that's like a 5th. If they're going down a little bit more, maybe they want a 4th out of it. They can send back that late 7th. We can get that off the board. Don't have to stay on the live draft show as long. That I always appreciate that. But I think they'll be able to pull off a trade down. But it's that could complicate things. Like if they were going all in on getting Starks, that's a tough proposition because again he may not make it. And then if you're gonna trade down, that's even tougher to make happen. So. And I know a lot of people love Nick Imanwari, and the guy is obviously very intriguing. I don't know if he's what they want at safety, though. Like, I'm not really sure.
He's like the anti-prospect for their secondary group. Yeah. He's super young. He's super green. I'm with you. I don't think they like him as a prospect.
Yeah. So I kind of have a hard time thinking they'll go that direction. And we all know they got to take a damn edge rusher. That's the other thing. And there's going to be an edge rusher there, whether they trade down, whether they stay at 15, there's an edge rusher that's going to be there. This is the depth of this class's edge. And if there's not an edge rusher they love, that means Kenneth Grant's probably there, and that's fine too. So, but I do agree. I think Fuller just gives them the flexibility they need to go into the draft and just let the draft fall. Like, I don't think they're going to pass on a safety if one falls to them. I think there's a lot of good ones. I know Damsky mentioned Andrew Makuba. That's one of my guys. I love Andrew Makuba. I think he's like a great Jesse Bates sort of backup.
It would be a great free safety to have on this roster.
Exactly.
Makuba would be a great addition.
Yep. I like Makuba. If they want more of like a nickel hybrid guy, Sebastian Castro could be interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys. Yeah, Bowman. Yep. So there's a lot of safeties in this class too. So I don't think this is gonna prevent them or like stop them from drafting a safety even high. But I think it's like you don't really know when you're gonna be able to get one because Starks may not make it to you. And I don't think they like Emanwari like that. It just doesn't really feel like a Falcons pick to me. Sorry, guys.
We didn't even talk about Xavier out of Notre Dame.
Well, spoiler alert, he may be in my mock draft on Friday.
Oh.
Yeah. But that's your little nug, guys, for everyone that watched the live show. See, don't say I never give you guys any inside information.
In the shuffle. That's a good
he has. Great player. So I'd also be happy to get him a little bit later, perhaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Fuller just gives them what they love. And they do this every year. They want to fill every open hole with at least somebody. It's not like the position's done. It's like, but we need some kind of guy that can step in. And I think that's kind of what Fuller provides. And I think if he has to start, it's fine. It's probably going to give you roughly what Simmons did, just more like run support than what Simmons did. Probably a little less coverage, a little less ball hawking. But he'll be fine. And I think the combination of him and Helms together is probably like approximately a starting box safety or strong safety or something like that. Yeah. So maybe that's enough. And we will see. And yeah, I still love Jahdae Barron, Corey, for sure. He's still pretty much at the top of my board.
Barron's the one that I think still is the highest likelihood of getting taken if he's there because he's going to get to you can play him enough to still justify taking him like at 15 because he's just going to take over the slot.
Yeah. And that's such a big deal for them. So
I'm with you too, Kevin. I think that I don't think this means safety's off the table. I'm interested to see if they I do think they're going to take one. I'm interested to see if they use a day 2 pick, if they try to trade down and then maybe do that. Talked about it earlier, but Richie Grant's the highest safety they've drafted. Every other safety they've drafted, every other DB period that they've drafted is around 4, 5, 4, and 7. And so I feel like this is the year where maybe Terry and them finally, invest a little bit more there, but maybe not the premium we thought unless someone like Barron falls and maybe they really do like Starks and they try to go after him too still in a trade down or something like that.
Yeah. I think Barron and Starks are the two they would be really tempted to take at 15, especially if a trade down doesn't materialize, then they would be happy, I think, to come away with either of those guys. But after, Jahdae Barron's not making it much further than 15. I don't think it. And Starks may or may not make it much further. I mean, I think he could even go, early. So we'll see. Safety tends to fall. We know that. But yeah, that I do like the Fuller signing. I think that just gives them the flexibility that they want. So that's nice to see. We got Noah C, the mod king with the $10 donation. Noah, thank you. He says, "What it do, gang? Can't wait for us to draft Cam Ward in the first round. Hope you guys are having a good night." Well, I was having a good night until you said that. Now my night's ruined. But no, thanks, Noah. Appreciate you holding down the fort for us. But I think next guy we want to talk about, should we go? I want to talk about Diablo. First of all, Divine Diablo, the best name ever. Give me that jersey. He needs an elite number, and I'm buying that jersey because there's no cooler name you're gonna get on the back of your jersey than Diablo. But aside from the name, I love how people misconstrued me saying he had an elite name as thinking he was an elite player. I was not saying that for the record, but guys, elite name. It says name right there. But he to me is maybe the biggest wild card, in that I think he could be good. He could actually. He's sort of like a discount Jamie and Sherwood who just doesn't really know what he's doing.
It's Jamie and Sherwood, but he's blind.
It's Jamie and Sherwood, but but he's got but he's like Jameis before LASIK version of Jamie and Sherwood. So but he's really athletic. I think he's got I think moving him to linebacker was smart. I think he does move really well and give you that sort of ability. I think his instincts as a run defender have improved a lot, and I think he does have some pass rush juice. But he should be a lot better in coverage. Like, I don't really get why he struggles in coverage so much, because it's not a lack of athleticism. It feels like he just doesn't trust what he's supposed to be doing, which obviously is problematic. But I'm curious what you think about Diallo, because I think he could be someone that ends up actually being a big contributor or being like a total bust. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I kind of feel the opposite. I was fine with the coverage work. I think like that's where I'm most the run stuff scared me. So like when I started with this stuff, I watched all of his run clips, and then I watched all of his coverage clips. And so initially I'm like, this guy looks like a hybrid safety, like what's going on here? And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, he played safety in college. So like a lot of the stuff made sense. Like I was like, okay, it feels like he just has trouble reading from the box. Like when you're closer to the line, everything just happens a lot faster. And so I just kind of didn't feel like his reactions were really like all too good, and his angles were a little rough. You can tell he's used to getting to have more real estate between him and the ball carrier. When he gets to take his angles, he kind of over pursues a lot. There was somebody who I was talking to where we were trying to see if maybe it was a coaching run fit thing, because the Mike linebacker did that a lot as well too. So sometimes you just don't know if it's bad coaching, bad habits. But like as a run defender, I was a little scared. I thought the coverage work was actually really good. Like there's times where I think he like was overconfident. And then he just had some straight up coverage busts like as well. You could just tell it was like, yeah, that's a bit of a mistake, just on his end. But from a pure ability standpoint, like it kind of seems like they could do a lot with him. The thing with him is that like this is a true will. Like this guy's not going to be able to take Mike snaps for you. They did Ellis at Mike, like, you know, in nickel and like it was okay, but like in base, I'm like, there's no way you can have Ellis playing Mike. He just gets eaten up in the run game. And so Troy's always been the will. He can do Mike work, but like Bertrand was supposedly drafted to play Mike. That's what he played at Notre Dame. They played him a lot at will. He looked like a will. So this team to me feels like it's got like a logjam at will linebacker and then no real Mike. But when I think about nickel and I'm like, okay, Troy Anderson, Mike, this guy will, okay, that can be fun if we're in passing situations here. It's a much better setup than like Ellis and Landman, or Landman and Troy, or Troy and like Ellis for the 3 snaps. I think we saw that happen all of last year. So I can see them doing some fun stuff where Ellis gets to be in that rusher role. You have the 2 of them as your coverage. You have the 2 of them as your nickel linebackers, as the Mike and Will, Troy and Diablo, and you know maybe they can get something going there. It's just a really weird looking room right now. This linebacker room is like still kind of gross. I don't know. Like, what's your take overall on the room itself and kind of like how they've built it?
Well, I think they still are hoping for Troy Anderson to be a big part of it, which I mean, look, they need it. Like they need it bad. And like when he was actually healthy and we finally got to see him play, it looked really good for that game.
Yeah, he played a lot of Mike in that Saints game.
It looked great. Yeah, and he got hurt on special teams. You know, so it's you know, so I think they really need Troy. And like, yeah, of course you need your, you know, top 50 linebacker to finally be something for you. That would be great. I don't know if it's going to work out. And this is basically the broader conversation of this whole free agency period and this whole offseason more than likely is I think they're just betting that Jimmy Lake was a horrible defensive coordinator, which I don't know if you guys saw the clip that, that Tre'Shon sent me before the show. We were talking about Felipe Franks, and I couldn't see Lorenzo Carter at the beginning of the play from the box view. That's a big red flag right there. And then he just like shows up in the play later and like in coverage seemingly, and I'm like, where the hell is Lorenzo Carter starting? He's in the slot. Like this man was sabotaging this. Like, I don't know.
It was rough last year.
Like I still haven't watched the defense of that game because I was so scarred by the clips I've seen I watched the offense. That was a great watch. The defense, I was like, I'm just not going to watch this garbage. And I think there's something to be said for, like, Jimmy Lake was a horrible defensive coordinator. Like, I mean...
Yeah, I know it's like, oh, Raheem took over. I promise you, that game was Lake's, like, that was his last chance to save his job. And
magnum
the worst
opus.
The defense had looked by far in weeks.
Yeah. No, the defense looked nothing like it had the previous few weeks in that game. That's part of the reason it was so jarring, I think, to everyone watching.
What happened?
Yeah. He was like, trust me, Raheem. You need to let me implement my vision. My vision never got implemented. You got to give me a chance before you can me. You got to give me a chance to implement my vision. It was like, okay. We saw the vision. It was a dark vision. It was dark. That was one of the darkest looks into the human mind that I think we've ever seen here in Atlanta. I think they're thinking like, well, that will help if we just don't have to deal with that anymore, which that's not great, right? Obviously that was the guy that Raheem Morris chose to hire as defensive coordinator. So that's a separate conversation. But they're thinking like, okay, well, we'll get Jeff Ulbrich, who is like an actual NFL defensive coordinator who has some very good defenses under his belt. That should help get us at least a little bit further than we were last year. And we're going to basically just go through and replace, we're going to talk about the other couple guys they brought in, but go through and replace everyone we've lost with like roughly similar players. And we're going to be wholly banking on our guys developing. And that seems to be the plan. Like we're hoping that Rook and Dorless and Troy Anderson and Braylon Trice and all these other guys are going to start and be good. Be much better than they were last year because Lake was terrible and our defensive line coach was awful. And, we hired those guys, but, we've realized that we really screwed up with that. So
it is consistent with their approach on defense. This is kind of what they've done every year. They are banking on certain guys taking that next step. And so, I'm with you that I'm worried that they're just going to kind of put all their eggs in the Troy Anderson basket again. And like, look, we want Troy to work. I think the two of us were like really riding on Troy needing to work last year. We wrote some checks that our Montanian did not cash. But we still need we still got to get something from him, and so it seems like he's going to be doing a lot more Mike duties this year, especially in nickel, with Diablo being here, because I just don't I don't know. It's just kind of like the defensive approach to the run defense so far has been very concerning.
Yeah, and also contract year for Troy Anderson, so he's probably going to have a Pro Bowl season. So
it's going to get magically expensive. Everybody's going to want him.
He finally exactly. So they're banking on that's what they're banking on. I think is that the contract year for Troy Anderson is going to light this thing on fire in a good way. But yeah, that seems to be the way they're going. And as we get through these next signings, you'll understand why we think that. Go to maybe Leonard Floyd next, and look. I don't think he's going to be significantly more impactful than Judon was. I think he's a better fit than Judon. Yeah. Obviously, and I think they're not going to be asking him to drop in coverage on like 35% of his snaps, which we already covered that being a problem. So yeah, he'll be more productive in Atlanta, I think. But it's like I don't know that he's like drastically better than Judon. I think he's kind of similar. I mean, they're not really the same style of pass rush or anything. I think he's a fine third edge that can be like maybe a pass rush specialist for you. They need to treat him like Dwight Freeney, basically. Like he's your finisher. He's always been a good finisher throughout his career. He can bring that veteran experience that you do want in that room with all these young guys. He can still give you some juice. He's not a great run defender. He's fine. But they needed somebody to come in. He had 8.5 sacks last year. That's more than anybody else in the Falcons had. So, and that was the rare year where the 49ers defense wasn't actually amazing. They were really struggling last year. So he did that, a lot with him just kind of showing out. So good for him. But I don't think it's a huge difference maker for them. But look, if he could get close to that sack number, he'll definitely be the best most productive pass rusher the Falcons have had in a long time. So I think he could theoretically get 8 sacks again. I mean, that's possible.
Yeah. I'm with you. Floyd's always been a Robin, but he's been a really good one. He's been consistent with his sack production. Obviously, there's the Falcons tax, the current room construction, everything like that isn't going to necessarily give him the same amount of opportunities to cash in. But we do know that Arnold Ebiketie was creating a lot of pressure, and Judon was not able to take advantage of it. And I do think that, like you're saying, in terms of being the finisher who can, I think Floyd is going to be able to clean up a lot of those pressures and turn them into sacks that AK generates. And I think that that's really something that they needed. That's an edge 3. That's a guy that you can put out there for the rotation, and that's kind of like the baseline quality for that. It being a 1-year deal though, and it being $10 million, I was with you when I first saw that signing. I'm like, sweet, Dwight Freeney type role. We're gonna be cooking here. Then I saw that $10 million come in. I'm like, damn, he's gonna play 700 snaps. and so now I'm worried that we're gonna see a lot of Floyd out there, and I just don't think that's his game. But like, you look at how much they're paying him, it kind of feels like they're paying him to play a substantial amount of snaps. Hoping that we get a real 3-4 defensive end, or just a bigger outside linebacker edge who can kind of do some early down work, because Floyd's just that's just never been the strength of his game, and as he's gotten older, it's declined. So really hoping that they can get some guys here that can help take on some of those roles. That's what they did with James Williams last year. You get that 3-4 defensive end who can do that heavier stuff, and then you can bring in the pass rushers.
Yeah, and I think they need him right now. We'll see who else they bring in. I think ideally you want him to be like your third snap getter, like your third highest snap getter on the edge group. And like it'll be pretty close to the second guy more than likely in snaps. You're trying to rotate. But the other thing I'll say with this is I think Zach Harrison's going back to edge. I think it would be dumb for him not to go back to edge. So I hope they do move Zach Harrison back to edge, because he's exactly what you just said, Tre'Shon. Like, they need a bigger guy that can stop the run. They already have one, and he's already done it. And they have too many damn defensive tackles as it is. Still, they have too many defensive tackles. So, get Zach Harrison back on the edge. Stop screwing around with this. Like,
yeah, let me tell you, I'm worried right now because, like you said, they got a lot of defensive tackles, but he's the best run defender they have among them that we've seen so far. I think Rook's going to take a big step this year and make some people happy. But boy, they were playing Zach at nose tech last year. They were playing him as a 1, and I'm just so worried because if you look at this roster right now, there's 2 guys on it that are probably going to get put into that nose tackle duty if they had to start today, and it would be 2 guys that you don't want to see there at all, and it'd be Rook, who I want to see playing 3 tech, and it'd be Zach, who I want to see playing 4-eye, 5 tech work, getting him back to where he belongs. So
yeah,
I'm with you, but man, like this defense right now is just kind of like constructed. Again, it's such a interesting, like you said earlier, we're not done. There's still signings, there's still a draft, and so this thing's going to fill itself out. But the approach they've taken so far is just kind of like, from a run defense standpoint, I'm just like holding my breath.
Yeah. I think it's very much a work in progress. And I do wonder if we're going to start going back to like a 4-3 under sort of style. I mean, that's what Ulbrich has typically run. And as we saw with Quinn, like you can run a 4-3 under that looks a lot like a 3-4. You just kind of play your D tackles a little bit more like a 4-3 lineup. And that obviously worked really well with Grady and stuff like that. He's not here anymore, but RIP Grady. He's still very much alive, just not with the Falcons anymore, for the record, guys. Please continue your exploits elsewhere, Grady. We don't deserve you. But David Onyemata still a Falcon also. That was a shocker. So that's why I think they're going back to 4-3, Tre'Shon, because I don't see why you're keeping David Onyemata unless you're going back to 4-3. So
I think him being here is still kind of me. I don't know. So like with Nielsen, he wanted to do multiple. He wanted to do 3-4-4-3. He wanted to do it all. I think Dio can kind of do, but like, Morgan Fox was the signing for me where I'm like, they're staying at 3-4. I'm like, Morgan Fox can't do anything but be a 3-4 DT. Like he is really weird in that he's going to fill the same role that Grady kind of did if we're in that 3-4 still, but he does it in a completely different way.
Man, I don't know what the hell they're doing. Yeah.
I'm with you, though. You could see them definitely doing some 4-3 under. I think at the end of the day, they're going to be a nickel.
Yes, they're going to be a nickel. Yeah.
That's what Raheem wants. I think Jeff's cool with that. I think that's what we're going to see. So, I'm just telling myself that I'm getting all worked up about this current construction for nothing, and just hoping that holds true through the summer.
They're probably going to be multiple. You're right. And you mentioned Morgan Fox. So, tell me what you think about that side. I've always liked Morgan Fox. He is very specific, but he's good at what he does.
Yeah, he's like a people talk about DPRs on the edge and stuff. He's like that rare DPR defensive tackle where that's his
Adrian
specialty.
Claiborne,
He has a really nice pass rush bag. He's got a really good setup. He's got a consistent counter that he's able to work. He likes to do the swipe. He's able to do the stab and rip. He has pass rushing down. And the only thing is that he's not a great run defender. He's had 15.5 sacks the last 3 years, which is a lot. It's a lot for him than Grady, whose role he's filling in for. So, you like what he offers you as a pass rusher, but he's hit the 30-year age mark now. He's a smaller guy. It's a very specialized role. And when I was looking at his snap counts, he's never touched 600, 700. Grady was an Iron Man and played a ridiculous amount of snaps. Fox isn't going to be asked to do that. So he's somebody where I'm like, okay, this is cool if we can get a real run defensive tackle or a real 3-4 defensive end, or just, again, the way that they're built right now, outside of Rube, Zach, and Dorless, they're very speed. They're very finesse group. And I'm just looking for them to bring in that power. TQ's kind of in the middle for me. He doesn't really he's not a power guy. He's not a speed guy. He's solid. I think that's one of those signings that was for the run defense, with TQ. But I'm just hoping that we see them kind of add those bigger bodies. It's making me look more at Landon Jackson. It's making me look more again at Shamar Stewart. I'm seeing that he's kind of fluctuating in the mocks again. So I don't know if he's somebody that's in play. But they just don't really have those kinds of body types in the room right now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely think the Falcons will take Shamar Stewart if he's there. He is 100% their guy.
But 32 in that was crazy to me. Yeah. He's the last pick of the round. I was like, what?
Yeah. No, I mean,
I think that was Daniel
who knows?
Jeremiah.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what teams actually think of him? I know everyone got all extremely hyped off his workout, which I get, but he's definitely.
We saw him in person. He wasn't impressive.
He was. He just doesn't produce in games at the moment, but that could change. So that's what you're drafting him for, is hoping you can change that.
I like
great track record with that. Yeah.
Because it's people complain oh, well, he played a lot of 4-eye, and I'm like, well, I need somebody who can
well, you don't say.
So that kind of works for me. Even at worst, you can he becomes that. Obviously that's not what you want with a 15th pick, but hey, they're either Gerard Verse or they're Tyree Wilson. So you get these power rushers, and it's a huge mixed bag.
Yeah, it can go all over.
Well, it's not fair to Verse. He was a very good prospect.
Yeah,
very
Love
productive.
Verse. Edge 1, Jared Verse.
Trayvon Walker
Never forget.
or Tyree. There we go.
There you go. Yeah. One of them developed, one of them didn't. That's how it goes. So, let me see. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else we should touch on.
So for me, I thought, we didn't talk about Mike Ford.
That's right, the GOAT. Yeah, special teams GOAT. Yeah,
the special teams GOAT right there, coming back to town. When that signing first happened, I was sick. I told you, and then Hodge happened. It's awesome. I think Hodge has more upside as a receiver than he gets credit for.
Yes,
I like to get a little bit more consistent, but he has playmaking ability. He has big playmaking ability. It showed up a lot last year. And then Franks, and then so it's kind of we were saying, special teams really getting some love here. Mike Ford, the defensive back, scares me. I don't want to see that guy.
No. That's oh no, break glass in case of 4 DBs got hurt today.
So I'm hoping we bring Kevin King back. He's still on the table. Okay. He's somebody I'd like to see them back.
What about I don't know much about Keith Taylor. I heard he was a good special teamer too, but
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm not diving into Keith Taylor's 35 snaps.
Yeah, I'm like, I think he's done some. I don't know if that's really been like he's been great at it, but he has taken a lot of snaps on special teams.
Yep.
Re-signings.
Yep. All the O-line guys. Yeah. Love the O-line guys. I think other than Dahlman walking, I think we were pretty dead on that they were just going to bring back the whole offensive line. So,
yeah. What do you think? So, obviously, they've missed out on a lot of these center additions that could have probably legitimately pushed Nuzeel back into the spot. Them giving Nuzeel the lowest possible tender. To me, I'm like, okay, you've put a real value on him, and it's the lowest possible value you could give him. Are we in center talks now for the draft?
Yes.
Is it because I feel like there's nobody else out there right now.
Yeah, I start penciling Jared Wilson into your mocks, people.
Seems like a hot name.
Yeah, I mean he's what they would want. I mean he's super athletic, actually a really good pass protector. He's like the anti-Dahlman. He was like a great pass protector in his 1 year of starting, but he's also like Dahlman. He's a crazy athlete, but he wasn't a great run blocker. I think he really needs to get a lot stronger, but they seem to be caring a lot more about pass protection. I think the fact that they haven't extended McGarry also is kind of signaling that they're going to transition this to more of a pass-first offense. And they're going to be changing the offensive line as well to kind of support that. And Wilson would absolutely fit that. But to draft Wilson, you're either going to overdraft him in the second round or you need to get a third-round pick. And the earlier the better if you actually want Jared Wilson. So, I wouldn't be shocked if they take him in the second. That would be kind of but I wouldn't be shocked. So,
boy, that's a lot. I liked him a lot in the run. Actually, I saw his explosiveness really pop. I do think that there's a lot of inconsistency just due to the fact that he's not as experienced. He's also young. So like you said, the strength isn't really there yet. He's definitely just going to keep getting stronger though.
Mm-hmm. Still young, super young, 1 year starter. Movement skills are off the charts. I mean, he moves so well. That they'll love that. I mean,
I think the movement skills are there. I do wonder if I don't know if Ledford, when you look at the linemen they have drafted, again, it's kind of similar with the DBs. They go for the older guys. They go for, more established guys. So I do wonder if that is something that's going to internally make them maybe not feel the pressure to overdraft him. There's some guys on day 3 that I like. I think Jonah Monaheim out of USC. He, in my opinion, is probably one of the best pass protecting centers in the class. He was a career tackle. He's played at guard as well. He's got a lot of versatility, but he was center this year for USC, kicked inside. I think he has probably the best anchor of the group. He's somebody where I was like, okay, he has the movement ability to work in our run scheme, but from a pass protection perspective, I'm with you. I think they really want to emphasize that because interior pressure for Penix is really going to be what hurts him more than pressure coming from the edge because he wants to step up and work the pocket that way. Most QBs do, but where Penix is kind of always had issues is those on the run throws. And so when he's forced with pressure from the interior, that's going to be a big issue. I think Wilson, Monaheim, these guys that are really good pass protectors are going to be the kind of centers that they're seeking.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they're going to draft a center at this point. They didn't go after Bradbury. They didn't really make any efforts, I think, to get another center. I think they're fine with Nuzeel starting if they need him to. I think they're fine with it, and that's okay. I'm okay with it. It's not great. It's not ideal. They seem fine with it. So I would just buckle up. But yeah. Again, it's we can develop everything. We got this.
My thing with him is he's developed. They got him to where he was last year, and I'm like, that's the peak. I'm just really worried about cutting corners on the O-line. I think that's just kind of one of those areas where it's we've seen what this has done to us in the past when you buy high on a James Carpenter season that was good, or James Brown season where it's well, he had that one good year, and it's yeah, but do you want to trust that with Penix and his development timeline? I don't know, but they're clearly comfortable with him because he's the only one they're bringing back.
Yeah. And thanks, Falcons, for not announcing that you tendered him. That was real cool of you to do that.
That was weird.
That was weird to me, considering he's your only center.
Which, again, I think that kind of like reiterates the point. They want to draft one.
Yeah, they're going to draft one. They're going to draft one. Monaheim's a good name to throw out. I haven't watched him yet. There are some centers like later. And again, I think Newsle's okay. Like, he's fine. But yeah, they're not going to – I don't think they're going to go in with just Newsle and like a UDFA. Like, they're going to draft somebody or sign somebody too. Like, you know, and I think the depth everywhere else is fine. Like, Storm Norton, fine swing tackle. I think Elijah Wilkinson actually looked like a pretty good guard when he had to play. Hinton, I don't really get the obsession with Hinton. He's okay.
Yeah, I think they just like the experience.
They just like him.
I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh, all right.
I think Wilkinson's just better. And Wilkinson also gives you tackle flexibility. He's played tackle before. Not like well, but like he has played it. Like it's he can be your, you know, emergency tackle if you need it. So
yeah.
But yeah, otherwise I don't think there was anything else too crazy. You know, we're obviously still waiting to see if anybody else comes back. I like TQ coming back. I think he's a solid rotational guy.
I don't know if you saw right when we kicked off the show that Rondale Moore just signed with the Vikings.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. People were disagreeing with me on Twitter about this, where I was like, I think he has a better shot to make the roster in Minnesota. Like,
yeah, I mean, like, people are the tale of Rondale Moore really became something.
Yeah, it's like, look, like the Falcons and the Vikings receiver depth charts aren't like that. Like, I wouldn't say one is like that much better than the other. I mean, obviously the Vikings have Justin Jefferson. I think Mooney was a better wide receiver too than Addison last year. And I think Naylor was very interesting for them. So he could be their wide receiver 3, but I think Moore is looking at that wide receiver room and saying like, oh, I could beat Naylor who has 1 year of production. So maybe I could beat out Naylor and have a shot at wide receiver 3. I think here in Atlanta, he's like, Atlanta loves, like, not saying Atlanta's right about this, but Atlanta loves Ray McLeod. He doesn't really have a chance to he's not going to get a fair chance to compete with Ray.
He's like kicking Hodge off of his spot.
No, and exactly. Atlanta's got their special teams ace signed to a 3-year deal, so that's 4 receivers now. And then they drafted Casey Washington last year. And like, I think Moore could like reasonably beat out Casey Washington, but it's like, if he stumbles or gets hurt again, he's getting cut, because it's like maybe they keep a 6th receiver, but at that point it's like he has to beat a draft pick or a special teamer that just got signed to a 3-year deal, or he's wide receiver 6 and on the bubble, so he's got like no room for error. Whereas like the Vikings depth chart is like it's those 2 guys like Jefferson and Addison, and then Naylor, who's I think on an expiring contract, and 3-4 UDFAs. That's it. They're like they have no draft picks and they're nothing else. So it's like his path is like, oh, I just need to be better than the UDFAs to make this roster. Like, or maybe the Vikings draft a wide receiver, but they only have like 4 picks, so it's not like they're going to be loading up on wide receiver either. So, I know people like just want to make it like a roast of the Falcons, like, oh, like, you know, he just didn't want to play here. No, like I think his path
I don't think the team even cared. I
don't think the Falcons tried.
Free agency.
Exactly. Like, so it's like, you know, I think it's much ado about nothing. You know, I think yeah.
The Rondale Moore thing has been so weird. He's Desmond Ridder. Like, that's what he was traded for.
That's what he was
Desmond
worth.
Ridder isn't even with the team that traded for him. Like, this is what happens to these caliber players. Rondale Moore is not this secret gem. Like, there's a reason that he was viewed as Desmond Ridder caliber for a trade. And I don't think the Falcons are missing out on much by not going after him. They probably don't want to deal with counting on a speedster who gets another massive lower body injury. We don't even know how much athleticism he's recovered. We saw what happened to Avery Williams when he came back. The juice was gone. That's what happens to those smaller, shifty guys. They're not always able to bounce back. Not everybody's Adrian Peterson. So the team just decided that the risk wasn't worth it, and he's moved on, and they can draft Jimmy Horn Jr. or LeJonte Wester in the 7th round and get the exact same thing out of it and probably get better return production and better receiving production.
Yeah. So I don't lose any sleep over that one, guys. Like, yeah, I mean, I was interested in seeing if he would come back. I think he's kind of like, it could be a fun camp story or something, but yeah, like the Falcons are not like, so before, we should probably get to the actual topic of the shows. Did the Falcons improve, you know? But yeah, I mean, don't worry about Rondale Moore before we switch gears here. But, you know, so far, it's been 1 week. do you think the Falcons have improved through free agency so far, or what do you think?
No, they've not improved in free agency so far. And you know what? It's multiple things. It's just like the players that they lost. Grady's still a big loss. I know he wasn't worth the money, but he's not a bad player. He just wasn't worth his contract. So you look at Grady going out, you look at Fox coming in. That's a loss on the run game. Honestly, it's production-wise, you can say it's a gain as in the passing attack. We brought back PQ, so like all of the net signings that canceled, all the re-signings, the depth, everything like that, we stayed the same. Special teams as a unit definitely got an uptick, but the secondary is pretty much the same. Mike Fort's not making you feel better about that room. Again, Mike Hughes, we know what we've got there. Fuller, Simmons replacement, better in the run, going to be worse in coverage. So, Divine Diablo, not really moving me on the linebacker room. We already got into that earlier. So it just kind of feels like, outside of maybe Floyd, I don't feel like they've really added like a, player where I can really point to like the needle moving. I'm not even saying Floyd moves the needle, but if we get to the point to where Floyd's our edge 3, like we talked about earlier, then you look back at that move and you're like, yep, that's great. They had a plan for it that worked out. He was the edge 3 they needed. So I think Floyd's a good positive there. But overall, it just looks like the team has pretty much stayed the same, maybe gotten a little worse in some areas, but we also said they got better in a few. So it's only been a week, but no, they've not gotten better. And for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think the defense is probably a push, maybe a hair better. I mean, we have to see what they do in the slot because like D'Alford, like didn't have a great season, obviously. And they haven't really added anything there. So like, I mean, I would rather have Alford back, and at least you have the possibility that he returns to his 2023 form, and you're feeling okay about the slot, and that could still happen. We'll see. But I think mostly it's a push. I like the Diablo signing better, maybe just because I love the name. I'm very biased against guys with elite names, but I do think he's kind of a wild card where I could see him if they have a clear role for him and he kind of takes that step forward that we'd like to see him take, and becomes a more reliable run defender, or they have a role for him that's good, then maybe he could provide. Like, I think he boosts the athleticism of the linebacker room, which they really, really needed. So that, to me, could be a help. But I agree with everything else you said there. But the thing that pushes this into not being an improvement and an overall net loss is that they lost Drew Dahlman and didn't replace him with anyone. I mean, they have Newsel, so they don't really take a step back in pass pro, but we saw what the loss of Dahlman did to the run game. It hurt it, like, a lot. And maybe they'll fix that in the draft, right? Or they'll get someone in here that we feel better about in the draft. But I think the loss of Dahlman pushes this into a net negative. So it's not like they didn't add any good players in free agency, but because they lost Dahlman, that sets them back. And I think they're at a net negative right now after the Dahlman loss that they have to kind of dig out of. And I think it's a really interesting position because, I think that my personal take is that this regime needs to win this year, or they could be two and done. Like, I think Blank's patience might be running out, but they're not operating like that. Like, and maybe that's just what Fontenot is. And Fontenot's like, I'm just going to do what I think is the best plan for the team and act as if I'm going to be here because, if we do well, I don't want this team to be peaking or like just selling out to win this year. Like, I'm going to do what I think is best, which would actually be refreshing. Like, if he did the opposite to a Dimitrov final year where he like went all in on terrible signings and like basically destroyed the cap for the next 2 years. Fontenot didn't do that. And so maybe that's just him being like, I'm not going to blow up the cap to try to squeeze out a couple more wins this year because I think it's fruitless. And he's probably right. Like, honestly, like he's probably right to not do that. This was a weak free agent class. You were going to overpay for these top free agents. So maybe that's the right move. And like, we should maybe applaud him for that. But at the same time, we might be sitting through another losing season. I mean, that's what it looks like right now after a week of free agency, which again is way too early. But nothing that they've done so far would convince me that this team is going to take a step forward. You're basically completely depending on the offense becoming elite under Penix, which, like, they have the scaffolding of this in place. Like, that's not the craziest bet that this offense takes a big step with Penix this year, and Penix is everything we've ever dreamed of. They've got great receivers. They've got Kyle Pitts maybe actually playing a real role for once. Maybe Newsel takes a step forward. He has only played center for a couple years. Maybe they're banking on that. And the prayer is that the defense loses a man that maybe was actively sabotaging it with his scheme. I'm just kidding. I don't think Lake was intentional. That's a joke. That's a joke, guys. I don't think Lake was intentionally losing games. But, the scheme felt like that at times. But I think he was doing his best, I'm sure. And they're just hoping that, like, all these guys they drafted that haven't really done anything for them yet, they're going to play now and they're going to pan out. And, I mean, they're basically banking, it looks like right now they're banking on this being like the 2023 Rams or whatever, where they were like, well, we don't really have anything. Like, we can't really add anyone in free agency. So here's a bunch of young guys that we have and all these young guys that we previously drafted. We need these guys to step up, and we think they're going to do it. And they did. And they actually had a good defense. And it shocked the hell out of me. So, like, that, there is like a, very narrow path they could snake through here to make this work. But it's a narrow path right now. I'll say that.
Yeah, I think there is at some point, we'll see how this offseason plays out, but a larger conversation to be had that this is not a 2-year timeline, and that Fontenot and Morris might be given a fair shot to get to 4 years. It's different for Quinn. I understand in his second year, he went to the Super Bowl. If they had gone like 9-8 again in that second year, I find it hard to believe that Blank would have fired them. It doesn't really feel like it's his MO. And so if the Falcons have another 8-9, 9-8, but he feels like Penix developed and he feels like there is a foundation forming because the team did not rush through this offseason and pull all those levers, then he might be cool with them staying. I think of like how Howie Roseman, we look at him now versus like Howie Roseman, Chip Kelly era. Everybody wanted to throw Howie Roseman out of like Philly's building. They ended up keeping him and putting him in like an advice executive role halfway through Kelly's tenure. And then he got re-promoted again, and they felt like he was never really the issue. And so Atlanta's talked about this like Philadelphia model. Well, how far does that model extend? Do they want to follow the model down to a T into the front office the way Philly did and keep the same people for as long as possible? Maybe Fontenot is the guy that's going to get to be the one they choose. Like, he's making a lot of these moves right now, like you said, that seem to be focused on like, hey, we're going to survive the cap storm that we created. We're not going to overextend ourselves, and then we'll be freer in the future and be able to make some moves while we still have Penix on a cheap deal. What's weird is that the NFL just doesn't work like that. It doesn't operate in that kind of like mindset really ever. We've only seen a couple of teams kind of commit to doing something like that. And so you wonder if Atlanta thinks like, well, that's what the Ravens had done for so long. That's what the Eagles had done for so long. That's what so-and-so. But there's a certain level of success that all of those GMs had at little different spots through their run. And we have not seen that happen for Fontenot. There hasn't been a winning season. There hasn't been playoffs. Like, this is just really interesting. And I think you've kind of kicked off, that discussion there of like, maybe we are all overestimating the fire right now that like could, be underneath Fontenot's seat. And maybe it's not as hot as we think it is.
Yeah. And obviously there's a lot of context for that we're just simply not privy to. Unless somebody wants to talk to me about it, give me a call, but it's always felt like the fact that they didn't fire Fontenot with Smith, I think tells you a lot, that they didn't really view that as Fontenot's fault. So, and the fact again, that they didn't have Fontenot at the press conference about Smith's firing, also weird, right? But it's also, I think they meant it to be like, well, he's kind of separate from Smith. Like, and like we're kind of separating him from Smith. But the fans and most people aren't making that separation because they were together for 3 years and they didn't have any success. So for fans and for most people that are looking at the situation, we're looking at this as year, 5 of the Fontenot experience. Blank might be looking this is year 2, right? Like we're starting over.
All over.
It's a new regime. We're starting over. Maybe they're empowering Fontenot more than they did. Maybe they realize that, Rich McKay maybe had too much influence or whatever it was. They certainly made a public spectacle of pulling McKay out of football ops. So whatever that means. But I don't know. I don't really think that you should be, we don't have the context to really say, we don't know. Did Fontenot have total control of the draft, or was he just running free agency and somebody else was pulling the draft strings and Fontenot was just going along with it and conducting the deals? We don't know. But
we know Felipe Franks was his guy.
Yes, absolutely. Felipe Franks, he secured the most important asset in Felipe Franks. So that should at least buy him another year right there. But it's really fascinating to see how they play this. I certainly hope it results in winning football, because guess what? It doesn't matter if you start winning games, right? Like they could slow walk free agency and save money and all that. And if they can somehow cobble their way to a winning record, they'll be fine, right? Get to 9 wins and you're fine. We want playoffs, don't get me wrong, but I think if they can just climb their way to a winning goddamn record for the first time in 8 years or how long it's been, it might as well have been a decade at this point. Who knows?
It's about to be.
Yeah. They gotta get to 9 wins somehow. And maybe Michael Penix is their ticket. Having a really good quarterback can get you a long way. And maybe they're right about, and maybe this is Raheem being someone who is obviously fallible, but unlike most coaches, is quick to recognize when he has screwed up and was like, I thought it was going to go like this with Lake and, Jay Rodgers, and this was what I was pitched from these guys before I hired him, and I liked what they had to say. It didn't work at all. We're getting off of that. We're going back to what, we're doing something else, and I think that's going to make a big difference. Maybe it does. Maybe the scheme change and plus development is enough to keep this defense from being god-awful. We just don't know, and we can't answer that. So all we can do is evaluate what the roster looks like and the moves they've made. And so far, the team has not gotten better. They have not improved so far. I think you could maybe say the defense has slightly improved, or at least the potential of the defense maybe has improved. The offense has taken a step back. I don't think there's any way around that. You can't lose a $14 million offensive lineman and replace him with a former UDFA and think that you're not going to have any sort of consequences. That's where they are there. Again, we're a week in. They got a long way to go. A lot of moves to be made. Trades, the draft, but it's still, it's the same thing that it was 2 months ago when we sat down here after the season and said, it's going to be hard as hell for this team to improve. They're saddled.
Offseason yet?
Yeah, they're saddled with a big quarterback contract that they don't want anymore. They do have maybe the most important thing, which is a promising young quarterback, which we could know after. Maybe the biggest thing is it doesn't even matter about the wins. If Penix is legit, if we know at the end of this year that Penix looks like a franchise quarterback, then their jobs are safe. Fontenot's probably safe because if he drafted a franchise quarterback, we know that buys GMs 4 years, right? At least, typically. So maybe that's what they're banking on, is they trust Penix completely to at least make the team competitive, and that he will show enough to look like a franchise quarterback, and that at the end of the day, that's all they need to secure their jobs. And then, I've said basically since, even before last year when the new regime came in, 2026 is the window. That's what they're looking at. And even looking at the Kirk contract, you could tell they were planning to be free and clear of Kirk by 2026, unless he was playing like a Hall of Famer still, which not really much of a chance of that happening, I think, even in our wildest dreams. I think it maybe was reasonable that Kirk could play this year, and 2024 and 2025. I think at some point they were probably going to transition to Penix, because I think we all knew that Kirk could feel Penix breathing down his neck, and part of the reason he hid his injury was because he knew If Penix got on that field, he was not coming back on the field. Penix was too good. Because he had eyeballs and he could see the practices. If Kirk didn't have anything to worry about with Penix, he wouldn't have bothered to hide the injury, would he? So, I'm excited to see Penix this year. I think that's the one thing we certainly can look forward to is that we should have a good offense. But if they don't get this defense to at least passable, like it's going to be the Panthers game every goddamn week, and that's not going to result in very good performances. So, the Falcons are in a tough spot. We knew that. They've basically had the free agency I expected, which was pretty slow. And they didn't even bring Dahlman back, so I was even disappointed with that. But,
Yeah, and honestly, like, I'm cool with not resetting the market with Drew Dahlman because, like, while, like, Dahlman is a big loss, like, I mean, like, he was, like, the weakest link or the second weakest link is, like, between him and Bergeron. So, like, at the end of the day, at least you didn't lose, like, your second best lineman. You'd still lost one of your starters who, like, brought you real value in the run game. But, like, I still think that through the draft, they'll have some options that we could get to. And I don't know. Like you said, it has been slow going so far in free agency, but there's still time. There are still a couple of options out there. There's still some players that are, potentially on the trade market. But, we'll see what they do moving forward. It's been a very slow free agency, which that's never good for fans in general. No fan ever likes to see that. So it's kind of hard to get people excited about, anything that's happened. But really need to see something come together for this defense.
Yeah. And I'm guessing maybe other than a center or an offensive tackle, like a developmental guy, it's probably going to be all defense. And I think the trade down is also going to be to get more defensive players in here because they need them bad. So we'll see what they end up doing. We did have one final question from Corey with the $2. If we do draft a rookie center, what are the chances that we use Lindstrom to call the line schemes? I don't think so. I think they're going to have the center do it. We'll see. I mean, I don't, but yeah, typically you're not going to have an offensive lineman other than the center calling the protections. They might have Penix do it. I mean, he's experienced enough. He played a lot in college. I don't know how much of that he did in college. But Newsel, I think called the protections when he played. So I think if they don't trust their rookie center to call the protections, he's probably not going to play over Newsel until he's ready to do that. Yeah. So, I don't think that I would be too worried about that. I think whoever they draft, if he's ready to call protections, he'll play. And if he's not, Newsel will probably play until he's ready. So, and again, you could get that. Like if they draft a fourth rounder, or a day 3 center, that guy might not start week 1. They might let Newsel take over early, and then maybe sometime during the season they might transition to the new guy, or maybe he starts in year 2. I mean, that's what Dahlman did, right? Played behind Hennessy the entire
year to put on, add some strength.
So that's not out of the question either. Like I would be fine with that. Like if Newsel's average starter, fine, and you've got a young center developing behind him to maybe step in next year, that's fine with me. I don't have an issue with that. So, but anything else you want to touch on, Tre'Shon? I think we covered pretty much all the initial chaos here. So.
Yeah, no, nothing else. I feel like we've covered everything. I'm just for me, I'm loving the special team signings. Like, I'm jazzed about the special team signings. They're not done, so I'm trying not to panic about some of these rooms, like the tight end room, like the edge room, and the defensive tackle, the lack of nose tackle, all that stuff. I'm not gonna let it get under my skin just yet. So I would just recommend everybody else try to do the same. It's gonna feel like pulling teeth from here till the draft.
Yeah, it'll be tough, but we'll get there, and hopefully they'll make us feel good in the draft. But if last year's any indication, they'll maybe make us go crazy. But that ended up being smart, so I guess we'll see. And they need last year's class to hit so bad, because if Rook and Dorless aren't playing like serious snaps, then I don't know what the heck they're going to be doing on the defensive line. So we'll see how that pans out. But guys, thank you so much for joining us here on the Falcoholic Live episode 320. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done that already. Subscriptions in particular really helps us out. Definitely appreciate that. If you're a podcast listener, leave us that 5-star review in your podcast platform of choice. Thanks to everyone who's already done so. If you want to support the show, you can do so at Patreon, patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. You can also join the channel memberships on YouTube. We will be having another patron mock draft here soon. I don't know if it'll be next Monday or the Monday after, but it'll be real soon. So keep an eye on the socials and the patron channels for when that's going to be scheduled. And then, yeah, we will, like I said, tease at the top, my post-free agency mock draft with trades will be coming out Friday. So buckle up for that one. And yeah, we'll help you guys get through the rest of this offseason. Lots of draft content, probably more free agency too. I don't think they're done to get to before the end of April. So stick with us here on the Falcoholic Live and the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Before we take off, Tre'Shon, he's at Ep320 on the Twitters, Tre'Shon.io on the Blue Skies. Anything that you'd like to plug before we sign off?
No. Just check out the Falcoholic. Be coming out with center prospects list tomorrow morning.
There we go. Very timely. Yeah. So yeah, check that out. I'm interested to hear more about those guys because I was expecting Dahlman to come back, so I didn't really start doing work on centers until like a couple days ago. So interested to see that list. Definitely check that out, guys. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Also, I wanted to call, for Evan Birchfield if he's watching. I got the new microphone with the red helmet style. So it's hard to see. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but it's red, gold, white. For the classic red helmet sort of style here. You can't do black because that's just like turning it off the light. So it didn't really work, unfortunately. So there's no black on here, but that's my new style for Evan. So shout out Evan. If they do get a new uniform, I do believe this will be the color scheme of the new uniform because this is my intuition. If you look at what they painted that huge ass brand new locker room, they didn't paint it black. They painted it red and gold and white. And black too, but mostly red and black, so I don't think they did that just to honor the throwback look. I'm just saying. So that's a lot of paint to honor a throwback jersey. So that's my conspiracy theory is that the new jerseys will be that sort of old style look. But if we even get new jerseys, I guess we'll see. But maybe that's still in the making. But thank you guys so much for joining us. Appreciate you all. We'll see you next time on the Falcoholic Live and Dirty Birds and Brews. And thanks again to BetOnline for sponsoring tonight's episode.